Okay, so this is a conscious mind conversation with Courtney, Erica, and myself. Three perspectives of experiencing Nostradamus sessions. And so I will just say that I've got the three books, but I have not read any of the books in full. I have picked small little bits here and there out of interest and curiosity, but I have not spent much time on them. Every time I start reading Dolores's physical books, it sort of takes my mind into somewhere else, and I feel like I get into a higher state of consciousness, so I can't really focus, and I keep reading the same three sentences over and over again, or maybe the same one sentence, or maybe the same two words, and I can't get in my mind what's going on. So it's interesting because the one thing I did read, which was able to very much retain information of, was Dolores discovering that she can access she could access Nostradamus through other subjects that she uses with their key codes to be able to connect with and have conversations with Nostradamus. Previously, beforehand, she believed she needed to have someone with a past lifetime connection. And so she knew that they were wanting her to write this book and this information, and to translate all the quatrains. It was very challenging for her. It was very long, and it was a lot of work. And when she had to change many of her subjects to help her get in touch with Nostradamus, it just felt more disheartening when her subjects needed to move or shift, and she felt the weight of the world, the pressure of the world on her to be able to get this information out, when she realized quite quickly that the information he was trying to share with us was pretty intensive, bad case scenario timelines, which of course any good humanitarian would be completely focused on being able to try and help and correct any way possible. And she knew she had created something that was very powerful and special with her technique, to be able to find out more information from our collectives, our higher dimensional beings that are always here to support us in every which way we can to help humanity and ourselves. So she was really, really, really motivated to keep on this work. But when she realized that they were going to support her always to be able to do what they wanted her to do and needed her to do, she realized that the pressure she was placing on herself was unneeded and not necessary. So she felt so much more lighter, realizing when she just allows the work to flow, trusting that they have her back and that everything that she needs will be provided for her. I think she just felt very refreshed and relieved. So I can definitely relate to a lot of that myself. So I always feel when I read Dolores's books, it is literally something that I've personally just experienced myself, and I'm reading her books from her time, and I'm going through similar situations for one way or another, and it's just unbelievably perfect timing for me every time I read one of her books to find out something else to confirm for me that everything is perfect. And it's just, I love it. So anyway, so Courtney wanted to share her experience of listening to the sessions, because I haven't listened to the sessions, I've only experienced the sessions. So Courtney, welcome, and tell us how you are feeling about the content.
Well, first of all, like, I admire both Nostradamus and Dolores work, just because Nostradamus was really big on, he knew that he had a he knew he had to serve humanity and getting this information out, and it was really wearing on him, because it was a lot of just destruction and doom and gloom, catastrophe type things. But then once he got through to Dolores, and it was kind of like he gave her that assignment. I mean, she stuck to her, I guess, like her moral compass or whatnot, to that really guided her to allow her to stick with this work and get the information out there to translate all the quatrains. And I mean, as far as, so okay, so I've read the first volume. That was years ago, and then I'm in the process of reading the third volume now. And what I think is interesting, especially after listening to Erica's sessions with you and her, um, and just kind of the state of mind that he was in. Um, and Erica, I don't know how much you have read his books or even what information that you know, but I think it's interesting because the subjects that Dolores took in and, to gather information, they didn't know what her, she called it experiment, they didn't know what her experiment was that she was working on at the time. So it was like she had her own method of, once she got the client into the spirit realm, which was kind of like the space in between lives. And she would you know, ask them to, if they could go back to the 1500s in France and, enter the timeline of, Nostradamus. And so they all kind of had their, each client had their own method, I guess, of contacting him or viewing him, or whether it was like, getting imprints or telepathic communication or whatnot. But they all would see the same thing. They could all describe him about the same. They figure out, where he was in his life, if he was older or younger, what his room looked like. Um, and then she would always ask about, like, he'd kind of test her, because he wanted to make sure that he wasn't dealing with some kind of spies, that, there was a lot of people that were really interested in the work that he was doing, but also didn't really, kind of, shamed him too, kind of, didn't necessarily believe in the work that he was doing, as kind of an outcast, I guess, for his time. But they also knew that he had knew a lot of valuable information. He was making these, prophecies or whatnot. So, it's just the rapport that he would establish with her, yet she was also trying to establish the rapport with, being mindful of how the client was perceiving and receiving messages from him. I don't know, it's just very interesting. And I think it's interesting too that she would always use the same quatrain, and that was Century 7, number 14. And they would, without using the same words, they would all translate that quatrain very similar. They could all be related. So it was just, I don't know, it's just interesting. He definitely, I don't know if it was like his earlier years or later years, but he was definitely like made it known when working with the quatrains. He's very like what's the word, chauvinistic. He was really, you know, kind of like thought that women were inferior, and preferred a male channel, so he was kind of funny with different people in and out, of that. But I mean, she worked with a lot of women too, and a lot of women would go in and they seemed to be, easier to pick up on, just to get in that trance state, and just to be able to like have the information come through more easily and freely. um but yeah, and then, he was a physician of his time. He was a healer. He definitely, just like Dolores, and I'm sure this is where she got a lot of her beliefs and just like wrapping her mind around. And he was really big on how to manipulate energy in the body for healing. And he was really big on using the mind. He did even use mind control in a form of hypnosis, back when he would work one-on-one with his patients. Um, and then, it's talked about how he would use different flower remedies, and um, it wasn't something that he relied on, but he definitely would. He definitely seems like he used them often, and it would help him to get into an out of body experience, in a trance like state, and expand consciousness, expand his mind or whatnot. So he would meet people telepathically and spirit in that realm, spiritually, um, through these, he called them plant helpers. So through these plant medicines, plant helpers. So I just, and especially with the last conversation with you, Joe and Erica, um, it's just funny. It's kind of amusing because it wasn't like y'all were going in like having to try to explain these quatrains. It's like it wasn't just all business. It was like, he could play around and have fun with y'all's energy too. And that was another thing, because he said that when the people would come in, he talked about how their intent, it was like everybody has this energy signature. And so we talk about the person's intent, that he could tell what their intent was from the beginning. So, he just seemed very playful when y'all were last talking to him, and he seemed like he was on one of his, well, yeah. So he did use the plant helpers. He used them as he would grind them up, grind the seeds up, and put the paste in his mouth and suck on it, and I guess like absorb the juices from it and then spit out the pulp. But he would also do teas, and then he said something about him wanting to like ingest them completely with honey, I think. But I don't know I don't know how much or how often he did that. Um, but he talked about how let's see, he talked about how he had been clairvoyant pretty much his whole life. But he had guides. He had guides along the way that would help him to know, what seeds to take and what combination to put them in to be able to make these concoctions. So um so anyway, I don't know. I just thought it was interesting, and I think it's funny and cool that y'all were like able to tap in and see where that took you, because he did seem very playful and flirty with his redhead subject.
Yeah,
um
it was a very interesting experience because he felt like he was at his desk and I could feel that there was like a tea beside him and it was like after hours. So he was not needing to rush home. He wasn't going to have any of his clients come in through the door, any students. So it just felt like this was his kind of I'm not going to say Friday night drinks or anything like that, but it was, it was very casual. And because our intent, well, he already knew what Erica's intent was to talk to him and understand him a little bit more from his perspective. And then I think she only had a few quatrains that I never had read them before, let alone knew what she was going to ask. So, always with these things, I don't want to know what the questions are because I don't need to know. That's not my role. My role is to allow the channel to come through and, take over the body. But I did feel like as the session was progressing, I don't know. I don't think he was experiencing the same amount of time that we were, because I felt like each time the subconscious kicked in and removed him out and brought him back in, I feel like there was a lag of time for him. So I don't know, whatever he was consuming, I think he was getting more and more deeper into that relaxation of where he was at.
Hmm. So did you sense how old he was, you think?
Yeah, he said that he was 56, I think, or something. I can't remember.
That's right. Or that 52 or 56 or something.
Well, I can't remember. I didn't listen to the session. What did Erica? Can you remember the last session? How old he said he was?
The last session, 53.
Oh, 53.
I think it was 53 when we first started talking, and then at some point, his higher self had came in. We had connected again, and he was 56.
Okay.
In the one session?
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow, I didn't know that. I felt like there had been some sense of time, but I did not know that it was 3 years. That's weird. Really, I maybe should listen to their sessions. That sounds too crazy.
That's
Oh, and the higher self came in twice, I think, with the questions to answer some of the questions that I had. So, with the higher self coming in, chances of reconnecting back to the original would be only little.
It's so bizarre because I have no recollection of time when I'm under. And so, it just sort of feels like it's about, 5-10 minutes kind of thing. And I think they're around about an hour. And so that's so surreal that, okay, I'll need to listen to it because that must sound absolutely crazy. Because I felt like I was experiencing something that was very different from what I've ever experienced before. And I had asked Erica afterwards that what did they even sound like? Because that was so different that I was connecting to him. He was in my body as such, but not in my body as such, but he's in my mind. And then they push him out of my mind, bring the higher self in or subconscious or whatever, and then bring him back in again. And I just know when he was talking and it felt like he was flirtatious with you, I was like, oh man, I hope Erica doesn't think this is me. It was the only thought I had the entire time was I hope she realizes this is not me. This will be awkward for our friendship. But oh, well, that's interesting. So yeah, as I was just saying, it felt like there was some time delay, as I assumed it was because he was getting, that he was getting more intoxicated with his relaxing thing. I didn't realize he'd aged 3 years or whatever in that one session. That's bizarre.
Yeah, it was bizarre with this last one because the higher self came in, and the first time it happened, no one said anything. It was just like we were talking to him, and then it was like a tone change. So I think like the first time I had to kind of like judge what was happening, and then when we realized when he explained that he was a different, because I think I had made a joke like welcome back, and then that's when he had explained that what was happening, that it like it wasn't the same.
The higher self was explaining what was happening.
No, Nostradamus was when he came back. He was he didn't know that he had went, but he was a different age, but was still talking to us. And that's when he realized about the God thing, when he thought he was talking to God, and then he realized what was happening.
Well, remember the first time that we had a session with him, I don't feel like he was on anything that was mind altering for him, but he felt very sharp and it wasn't invasive, but he came in and he wanted to just scan all my memory and all my mind, and like he wanted to know what I had seen of Europe, and he wanted to connect everything that was in my memory banks as such. I didn't even know there is like memory banks and one beings body, but who knows, maybe he's like jumping into my Akashic records. I have no idea what he was doing in there, but there was so many memories just popping in, popping in, popping in. And I was like, why am I thinking of that? Why is this here now? This is my life. We're talking, we're connecting with Nostradamus. And it wasn't until quite a lot, he was like distracted. He was wanting to help you and answer you, but he was busy, 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 going and scanning everything of what was of interest to him, to be able to sort of see. And it wasn't necessarily like world events. It was more kind of like, what is our culture like? What are we like? What do things look like now in terms of my traveling? It was very strange.
Well, there was one of the clients that, I can't remember which one, but it was one of the males. And after going in and establishing contact or whatnot, and then Dolores thought that she would be able to continue to, use him for a connection. And he said that he felt like, almost like, not that he was being haunted by Nostradamus, but he felt like he was with him in his waking conscious life. Like that he was almost like, attached to some part of his consciousness that, yeah, like he was scanning just to get information for the timeline that they were in at that time.
Yeah, it must have been very hard. Like, it's interesting that you said, Courtney, that he knew he had guides. Do you reckon he identified, he did know that these were specific guides helping him, or did he just constantly think that it was God? Because when I was connecting in, it seemed like he thought well, he did know that there were some beings in the future that were connecting in with him. His main source of information, mind the pun, was God. And so it seemed like he just thought he had a great relationship with God.
I mean, he definitely uses the words guides, and he even refers to his wizardy friends or wizardy acquaintances that had shown him how to use the mirror, because there was a mirror that was in the room that sometimes the subjects would actually come through the mirror and he would see. Or he talked about a mirror that he could like walk through to act like astral project and time travel. Like he could walk through this mirror. Now, and then while it's trippy because I'm like, but I'm still like, I still question like, well, is there a physical mirror? Because he says that it's not a physical mirror that you would think of a physical mirror, but he talks about a mirror and the subjects talk about a mirror that's on the desk or the table, and talk about coming one of the ways like entering in the room through a mirror. And he says that his wizardry, that they can be quite dangerous, but his wizardy friends showed him or taught him how he could do that. But as far as God, let's see, this was actually something I listened to today. I think it was like chapter 12 or something I was listening to, and he was describing God and was talking about how he didn't agree with the man-made structure of what they had, the masses or whatever had placed on God. Like he definitely didn't think of God as this, holy roller in the sky. He talked about what he thought of God, and that being like wisdom and knowledge and being able to access, even though like the free will thing and all that and things can change, but he felt like God in itself could tap into, different timelines and could tap into future events. And he just really, what came up today was about the wisdom and the knowledge of all that is.
I'd love to
Yes.
know what age he was when he was saying that to Dolores. Was it
Yeah.
included into it?
I don't recall.
Mm,
Um, I know that they always were, trying to figure out at what age that he was for, each time that they made contact, because, he looked a little different in his earlier years. He had the clean shaved face. Um, in his mid age years, like in his 50s, they said that he had started writing everything and that he was easier to work with. But that's also when he was kind of at the height of his career. But then when he was older, he was still working, but he was just kind of just had that worn out, um, that worn out feeling or sense about him, that he's just worn down. I don't know. Like, I feel like when I do read these books or listen to them, I've been listening more than I've been reading, but I feel like I time travel. I feel like I get sucked into this whole movie
mm.
playing out in my head. And so it's funny to just picture him as these different versions with different ages.
I definitely feel that he is, he's come in quite a lot and embodied. And I mean, the very first time I had a conversation with him, he was very interested of the setup here. For many reasons, he was really very interested how I got to be able to connect with him. So it was really interesting for that. But it's only been since connecting with Erica that I got the sense that I'm sitting there at his desk. So now I'm embodying him, and what probably not maybe just aware of his mindset or his consciousness. I'm not too sure how I'm very firmly sensing him sitting at his desk, while he's is like I feel like I'm sitting at his desk and then he's sitting at mine. It's very peculiar, but also interesting at the same time, because when I do that, I get more of a sense of what his day has been like, and what is his mindset is like, in terms of if he's had some some boosters. I do feel like he was more relaxed chatting to us last time because it was like a social visit. And but I feel like the frustrations he had when working with Dolores was, he put so much time and effort into doing his work to be able to get it to reach Dolores and others who are doing the same work. I don't know if others are, I'm assuming, I'm hoping, but Dolores's work was enough, I'm sure. So I felt like he was so frustrated and really irritated that he'd done all this work, he'd done all his part and everything that he needed to do, and then on the other side, through translations and mistranslations and a whole lot of different situations changed. That I think this is what was really frustrating to him was, while it was great that it was masked and continued on, the annoyance of him having to mansplain his work, which, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if a genius is the right terminology, but he's very clever with how he's done it and it's worked out for him. But I think on the other side, he's very frustrated that it's not so obvious and clear to us reading his contracts. But this is what I noticed was when I started picking up the book and starting to look at the quatrains, I realized, oh, I'm actually interpreting this. I actually can understand this, and I'm getting a sense. And the biggest one was when I read one and I heard this is about Hillary Clinton, and I just was like, what? Like, that is so bizarre. And that's when I sort of dropped the book and I messaged, I don't know, I might have talked to Erica and gone like, well, this is kind of interesting, because I assumed that he had, when he told me that the Antichrist had died, I was like, sweet, done, on a new timeline, happy days, unicorns and butterflies. And then realizing that we do have other versions of smaller roles, more people playing the role of what would be, I don't think Antichrist is the appropriate, but we do have another agenda that is, has been trying to get their way with humanity. As we know from these sessions, they are no longer in power, even though the illusion of them still being here and alive is something different. So yeah, it's very interesting how everything is playing out. How do you feel, Erica, when you're doing the sessions? It must be hard for you to navigate what mood he's in, what's conscious mind he's in.
Um, maybe a little. My perception uh, of of connecting to him and the background to all of his books. I haven't read his books. I have scanned through volume 2 and volume 3. Um, a quick scan to whatever kind of jumped out at me. Um, I like to remember more in like future what's going on going forward. So um a lot of the information that has already either played out or needed to play out, those didn't stick with me. It's probably why I don't know much about probably a good portion of his books. But I can say when connecting with him, to me, he is a real person, just somewhere else. Like, uh, it's strange, like to think that he's so much older, I guess, in our time. I have a me and time. um, but I was thinking about today how I felt about the situation. And it's similar to like what Joe, when I message you and I make the joke about talking to you in the future, because realistically, you are in the future. There are people in the future and the past, depending on where you are at on a timeline, even in this timeline. So to connect with him is just in my brain, he is just in the past, like just in I don't even know how to explain it in my if I'm even making sense. But um
He's alive. You feel he's alive. He's just in a different time zone.
yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I'm a day ahead of you, and he's just, no big deal, like 600 years past you, you know. But you know what? To make a Zoom call to each other is actually quite easy. Oh my gosh, that's what really was so interesting that time when the feedback happened and he got to hear my voice, because when I'm sensing him in my body talking, I do not hear my own voice at all. I sense their energy frequency. I sense them talking and all that sort of stuff. So when he was talking away and then he could hear some feedback, he thought you were talking over him, and he stopped and paused, and then he heard it again and he realized you were literally repeating what he said, and then he realized that's not your voice. And then yeah, it was this big surreal moment for him, because he was like, ugh, gasp, I'm sounding like a female.
It also is exciting to me. It's very exciting because it's like in my brain, it's like um because he's had so much hard, like he's dealt with a lot of harder things. That was his purpose, is let humanity know about the harder things so we can know about them, prepare for them, and like overcome them or try to change, uh, make a better choice. And then now connecting to him now with us knowing about the shift and with him being older because he was 50, like still in his 50s every time we've talked. And I think we discussed that he passed away in his 60s, like 10 years later. So for him to almost be at the end of his life, in the sense of like he's closer to death than he would be like being born. And then we come in here and like we're shifting, we've made certain choices, and he's able to see that. It's like we've talked about this, like bringing that hope into him, like at the end, like with all of this work he's done to come in, it's exciting to be like, hey, we can get this information, we can shed this excitement with him.
Yeah, it feels like for him though, it's kind of, well, am I just a little bit high and having some crazy conversations with two beings from the future? Like it's while he kind of is at that point where he's not judging it anymore and he's just letting it go, it's still very hard for him to be able to comprehend that we are, where we are. Like he sees still from his perspective point still so many options. So he's like, okay, that's one good option, I hope that works out for them, but I still can sense and see all of these other really challenging things for humanity as still potentials. And I mean, I think you were kind of like, yeah, it's exciting, you can relax now, and why don't you retire? And he's like, I still have to do my work because like I can't just trust, because we were probably, I don't know, 1% chance that this would work out this way, and he just knew his role. But it was interesting because when he was in my mind, he was having conversations with my subconscious and higher self, and he was having conversations about, and they were telling him about his life purpose and the reason why he was having to do the things and experience the things and write. It was so interesting because I'm detached from my body. I can sense all the conversations that are happening, as well as allowing my body to be used by these different beings. And I could sense him asking my subconscious about his life purpose and what the whole point of his life was. And they were saying you had to experience it to help and write it down to help others. And it was, I keep thinking, how come he doesn't know this already? And it was so strange for all of those, so many facets. I still haven't wrapped my whole mind around understanding all of it. It was so layered. But it was really, really, really intriguing, that's for sure. But he still knew he had to do all his work with as much passion and as much focus as he needed to. But yeah, so interesting, so interesting.
But even given a timeline that he's working on, if even that 1% to know a good outcome, it pushes you to do the work. It's the same way as like we see all kinds of bad things happening, bad in just the sense that I'm using that word. But we still find the joy and the hope within situations to push us forward, to give us that slight different perception in a moment of time, to not stop.
Mm. I feel like when I flicked through, I can't remember if it's the first one or the second one. I feel like the way he's describing the Antichrist is definitely another person that we know who has a big role in our lives. And so many consistent information details about that. And it's we're only given as much information as we can handle, but we also are only given as much information as we're allowed to get without it being censored from us. And I'm wondering if this is part of what they knew, is, for example, Dolores's books, her own quatrains, for us to be able to decipher and understand and be able to read the bigger purposes of it while still being public.
Say that question one more time.
Yeah.
The way that Dolores, the information, like with the Antichrist and describing it as one being, one person, right? Some of the descriptions refer very strongly to someone that we know in our history. And I'm wondering if to get it still public for us now still and not be censored, have we has it been allowed to be a bit distracted? I don't think Dolores has ever promoted information that was not true. And I just feel like maybe we're supposed to read a lot of in between the lines and knowing that the information from his work is still, I feel like when I did read some of the quatrains all that time ago, the ones I did read, I felt like, well, he just keeps saying that they're all about Hiroshima, and I just didn't feel like that was always the case. And I just feel like there's so many that are referring to Hiroshima, and yet it already had passed in Dolores's time. And I know that he keeps saying that there is many many different hidden information and messages there. And I'm saying, as a whole, what if Dolores's 3 books? There is, when you read all the information from a bigger perspective of, you know, we have to use our own intuition and read in between the lines and know what we know in our current day. When she's trying to point out the Antichrist, we can see it. It's not one man anymore, but it still is pointing the finger at who it is.
Yeah. There was somebody who, there was something that came up about 1999 with the Antichrist from volume 3. It was something something that came through, I think, in a dream after the connection had been made with him. But I don't know exactly what else. And then those, do what?
Was it because the Antichrist had died?
No, it was something about the Antichrist being here in 1999.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. Well, I think, he was supposed to be in full force power at the age of 23, and then he would just grow tremendously and be, world dominating, and, just our worst nightmare. And it would be so intensive, and that he would be just, the overthrow of him, the death of him was going to be around 2000. And then, but he died quite a bit beforehand, and then it seems like other people had to take on his place to be able to help humanity learn from those lessons. And then, we've all experienced different forms of agendas and control, and they are still doing, in quotation marks, the Antichrist's work, but in less, like, with discretion. Even though we sort of feel like it's very blatantly obvious at this point, it's, it's not as ruthless as this huge dictator that would have, brought humanity to its knees. It's still manipulative, but it's a softer way about it. And this is why we're having this delay to awaken, is because it's subtle, because it's doesn't look like another version of a quotation marks Hitler or something like that, because he was supposed to be, worse than all 3 of them. There was, I can't remember all these horrible other leaders that we've had that have, changed the course of history, all, of course, to awaken humanity. But,
Right.
I don't know my history, so I'm simple.
Well, I know that we all know that cycles happen. Cycles of the different I don't know if it's timeline per se, or the things that happen on this planet. There are cycles for things. So the quadrants, all the different quadrants, they can be interpreted differently given whatever timeline you're on. So just because the book had a lot of stuff about Hiroshima, the quadrant might still be relevant for like almost like an analogy per se, like for another timeline to help explain, because the cycles are still the same. A lot of them are happen that way.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I kind of keep feeling like there is so much more that we can find out about our current time, in our lifetime, not necessarily our future, but our other stuff that we've experienced. I feel like there was definitely some sadness when he was in here last, when he realized that there was nothing really more big that he needed to warn us with. And the more we accept and understand that and can relax into, there's nothing but, profound evolution for us. It was almost a sadness like we won't need him anymore. And I think he has had this diligence of, humanity needs me, and that's what's driven him, not from an ego base, but from a true compassionate perspective.
Yeah, that that was a unique feeling during that moment. Um, I in that moment I felt almost like a loss inside because, like I said, to me, he is in a sense still real. So to know that I like he was feeling that way, obviously we would never want him to feel that way. That's not who we are. Um, uh, so it was kind of sad. And then to realize, like, when I asked him if he was going to be on the new earth, and he was like, no, um, it was, it was exciting because then not bad things are happening as much, really, going forward, but also uh, sad that he's played essentially a very big role in the the information that is here on this earth.
I realized what part of the sense that he had was, is that that sadness of not being able to keep helping us, but also that sadness, but it was more like a release, or just accomplishment of, he doesn't get to see the big finale, he doesn't get to see all the things we're about to see and for it to unfold. He did his part, and it was that whole, like, that big moment that you've worked all your life for, and then suddenly he just knows in a brief moment it's all going to be okay, humanity evolves, and it's not going to be more destructive cycles, finally, with part of his help for humanity, we get on track again. And I guess every step takes you forward from to win that marathon, but that last step feels like all those steps, and so it was almost like a little bit anticlimactic for him. But it was, yeah, there was a million, I felt like a million emotions in that realization of that conversation with us. I don't know if it was the drugs talking, but
Mm.
so interesting. Because we don't set intentions to be able to bother, we don't want to bother him when he's busy. So literally when we connect, it's when he's already open to connecting in with us. And I'm sure he probably connects with many other beings. But what I felt before, Courtney, when you were talking, is that potentially the people who are giving him the medicine information and the plant information are not on planet.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I don't know if I think anyone in the future just is, those guys. I don't think he is freaked out about where we are or who we are as such. If he can read our intentions, he's open to all the good, to be of service and to receive service from others. And, that's a good way to live and try and be as balanced as possible. I thought Dolores was really sweet when she came in that first session with him. And shared her experiences with him. I can't remember exactly what she said, but she was very pleased that we'd made that connection with him.
Yeah. It's I'm still trying to wrap my head around the inner workings of it. It's so fascinating. It's so fascinating because
So
really we're just made make believe to him. Like we are imaginary to him. Like we are aliens. We are not real to him. You know.
that's another perspective. Yeah, true.
It's like we're figments of his imagination. We're his imaginary friends when he gets high. But just for a second, I just think, I have had a few little, uncomfortable dreams in my life, and they stick with you for quite some time, kind of really put an impression on you. And if he's constantly having these out of body experiences, or I don't know whether it's all just dreams or whether he's putting himself into these trances and then seeing these premonitions. This is the first time I've heard about him, Courtney. You said that he was a seer. What did you say he was?
Well, that he would like astral project, and he would go into, with the plant medicines, he would go into the trance, to the spirit world. I mean, he said all these things about being in trance, being in the spirit world, expanding his mind, meeting, meeting people in that realm. And gathering information. I mean, astral traveling, all of it.
Well, I do feel like, he is right there with me, because before, what did we say? Before we started recording, I said something about him, and then he comes in to correct because he didn't like the joke I was saying about him. It's like, they're right there. And, it's just like with Dolores as well. If we think about them and talk about them, they're right there listening in and helping to, give us their perspective.
Yeah. I mean, and some of the clients that would be taken in, it was like he was having a full-on conversation with them, or that he was using, telepathy to, and the client was translating the messages from mind to mind.
Yeah, so interesting. I feel like he was talking to Erica, and then he was also doing something with my mind. Not that it was evasive at all, but he was so curious. It was like, I can see him and Dolores, they're two little peas in the pod. They just got curious little. Any last words of experiences from the sessions that you want to share?
No, I think I guess yes. But at the end of the last session, I think we asked him if he has talked to anyone in a more future timeline, and he said no. I'm pretty sure he said no, that he has not connected. And I think that was one of the times that his higher self came in, and that's when it was explained that to connect with, there wouldn't be a reason to connect per se, because the information doesn't fit in with his purpose. They came in and explained that. So that was a very interesting concept in itself.
It's so strange, because when you were talking, I was like, obviously he must have. He must have talked to someone in advance. But then I was like, then I felt no, because it was not our timeline. He may have talked to other people from other timelines that are advanced, in their timelines, but
Well,
not.
if they weren't good, they would still be playing out, most likely. If they were like, if different things happened, where we're at right now, those timelines would still be playing out some more.
So then the ultimate question is, how many versions of Erica, Joe, and Courtney are there in different timelines? And yeah, it makes me, I don't understand that. Maybe we need to do a session on that, because I guess we'll all be experiencing so many different things in all those different branches of us. But is that really, if that's the case, then would we only need to have one lifetime and then just branch out all the different options and all the different possibilities of one lifetime and master all that we need to do in one long, different timeline situations? If that was possible, then we wouldn't need to keep reincarnating, because you'd think if we were living with all the different possibilities and every time we made a different decision, all the decisions that we had created different branches of. Like, I need some time to think about that one.
Well, didn't y'all say that the two of y'all were going to be making contact a total of 6 or 8 times or something, and that hasn't taken place, right?
He said that we have connected 8 times.
Okay.
That I've only connected, at the time it was like, I think like 3 times.
But if you're saying in one session that we experienced, we met him he was at 2 different ages, is he counting those? And then when he just came in before and he said, I'm still alive, because we were talking about him, he's already passed on, and he's like, well, actually, I'm still alive, thank you. Is he counting?
Because you didn't think he was a higher being.
Wow. I mean, we all have self-doubt.
Well, I mean, essentially, he did point out that he was still alive. So, like, he's still alive.
Well, what I can tap into him is him being alive, but I have been able to talk. The very first time I talked to him and his higher self. And, it kind of feels like at one point you just feel their consciousness just fade away as you feel the other higher being taking over. And I can feel that. When I listen back, I can hear it in tone. I can hear so much different stuff happening. It may just sound like one person. It's me just talking the whole down session, but I can hear myself when you can feel certain beings coming in and going, and there's a lot of beings having their 3 cents worth of higher perspective information, not judging them, just thanking them every day for the messages and gifts they give us. But with when I first talked to Nostradamus, I could sense that it was his conscious mind, then it faded into his higher self. And so it's interesting, because for some reason, I assumed when Erica and I were going to work together and connect in with him and see if there is anything that is of common, any of his quadrants pertain to the information that we're experiencing now. For ages in that session, I didn't get, we're talking to the man. We're not talking to the higher, like we could be talking to his collective, we could be talking to his higher self for days on end, but for some reason we got taken to the man. And I think
we went straight to him.
Yeah. It's I mean, this work is fascinating. It's so intriguing. I love everything that we learn from it and grow from it. And, it just adds on to our knowledge and wisdom that we can, own for ourselves and use our moral compasses to be able to know, the best way forward for us, while still using our minds and intuition to navigate through life, which is so darn exciting when you can see things from a bigger perspective and trust everything as lessons and purposes and experiences, and it's not so serious. Courtney, did you have
It opens up your mind to who are we connecting to when we meditate or whatever you do. Like we know that we connect to the higher self and the subconscious and stuff like that, but given this little aspect here, it's like he thought for so long of his life he was connecting to a certain beings, or I mean, I'm assuming at one point he thought it was God, because that's why he had mentioned it. And that just kind of stuck with me, just because so many people connect outside of like this group. They connect to that little voice in their head. Like everyone says, that little voice in their head. It kind of is like, you know, who are you connecting to? Like, who is out there helping you? On what timeline? Are they alive? Like, are they really alive? Like, you're really alive.
I think that's what surprised me the most, starting off this work and suddenly realizing quite early on that the subconscious is a living being. It's not just a different part of our minds, like the, unconscious, subconscious, leg, belly button, they're actually, the subconscious is a legit, well, for me and for a lot of my clients, some clients, their subconscious is not physical, but most of my clients have physical, subconscious guardians, guides, whatever you want to call them, beings, that they're one of their primary roles is helping you and everyone else that's, different extensions of them. It's just a convoluted little universe out there, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Any final words of thoughts that you're trying to process through, Courtney?
I mean, a lot right now, but at the same time, I don't have the words like formulate what exactly. Yeah, I mean, I agree. The subconscious is like this entity in itself, and that is kind of what sticks with us and carries on from lifetime to lifetime, right?
It's like a buddy system. You're at like a new school, and then you get like the older level of students, that sort of get assigned to you, and you've got to like show them the ropes and support them and look out for them at lunchtime, and just it's a loving situation.
Yeah.
I feel sorry for someone that has to try and explain and depict in a good summary what our sessions with Nostradamus is all about. It's almost impossible to if someone has got a good description, email that to me. I would love to hear it so I can work it out for myself.
It's kind of like traveling or time traveling future and backwards at the same time.
Yay!
So it's all one. Because what is
sorry go.
I was just saying, it's kind of like traveling back in time and forward in time at the same time, because really, what is time?
Yeah, well, yeah, man-made construct. It feels like when the subconscious was kicking in, I feel like his subconscious, who was looking after him, who was assigned to him, feels like they're still alive. So that's another interesting thing. So even though while we're talking to Nostradamus, he's still alive, but then we know in this timeline, if we go to his house and knock on his door asking for a cup of tea, he's no longer there. He's not on this planet anymore. But when we connect in this way, he is. We can get to his timeline to hit, to have that accidentally interesting tea with him. And then, but yeah, it's very interesting to just feel that now, that when his subconscious is, because is it a subconscious or his higher self that comes in? Do you recall?
I don't think we actually clarified. I think I just thought it was his higher self. Honestly, I thought it was just the higher self that came in.
Okay. I really need to listen back to these sessions, but I feel like the highest self or whoever was speaking in a high dimensional information about him for us, they are still present in their role. So they have not evolved, and they don't. They're like, we don't need to evolve. Actually, we're quite comfortable in our dimension that we're in. So yeah, they're now listening to our conversation. But it's very interesting to know that they still have all the information about him and can jump in at a second and talk to about him on his behalf and know exactly where he's in, know exactly the information that we're talking about. Or it just still blows my mind how instant their information is for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Incredible. Okay, well, thank you, ladies, for sharing this and trying to untangle the convoluted experience with Nostradamus. I think he's definitely an extraordinary being for humanity. I feel like, he's a gift. I know Dolores is a gift, and every one of these pioneers who have done profound work to try and help humanity in the best way that they can, to give us wisdom. To be able to help us focus on what's the real importance here. And unity and inclusion and not exclusion is probably the most biggest thing we need to focus on right now, and not be tempted to get into silly debates of any gender, race, any sort of disputes. We must have profound unconditional love for all, even people in 600 years ago. We love you, Mr. Nostradamus. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank